Okay, I hear what you're saying, but realistically, the moon landing is fake.
So 300,000 people are lying, millions of federal documents, and the entire US government lied to the public.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Armchair Zealots Podcast. As you know, here on the podcast, we like questioning conventional wisdom. And what better way to do it than to examine and discuss the most widespread conspiracy theories of this era?
First conspiracy theory that we're going to be examining in detail is the moon landing conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theorists believe that the moon landing was faked, that really the US and mankind never went to the moon. And for various motives, for various reasons, and for various viewpoints that they hold, they think that the US and mankind never went to the moon. So what do you think the motive, or the best possible motive the US could have had to fake the moon landing would be?
A possible motive for this could have been the 1960s space race between the USSR and the United States of America. At the beginning of the century, Yuri Gagarin in 1961 was the first male in space. So the United States needed an advantage over the USSR, and maybe that could have been the moon landing in 1969.
One of the possible arguments for the moon landing being faked was the flapping of the flag, so let's delve into that.
The conspiracy theorists regarding the moon landing believe that the flag that was waving during the footage of the moon landing actually came from the moon landing footage being filmed on Earth and not being filmed on the moon, as was claimed by the US government. A possible reason that this theory could be false, or at least in my view, this is false, is that based on various experiments done by people on Earth, in vacuums, in rooms that were sealed off from air supply, flags could be put down in those rooms, frictionless, there was no air resistance, and just the twisting of the flag in order to seal the flag into the ground, as they did on the moon, could actually cause a lot of rippling and wave effects, as we saw from the flag on the moon landing. And Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong themselves have confirmed that digging the flag and placing it into the surface of the moon caused the flag to ripple. Therefore, there was no wind, in my opinion at least, there was no wind that caused the rippling of the flag, but rather it was simply that it was stiff before it was placed on the ground in the moon. And the moment it was placed on the ground in the moon, then it began to ripple based on basic physics principles.
So, and that's a major reason why people believe that the moon landing was fake. Another reason is because there's a famous photo of Neil Armstrong's footprints on the moon, and this does not match the footprints that are kept in the Smithsonian Institute National Air and Space Museum of his spacesuit. So the question is, why are his footprints different to what we have now and what was shown in the image?
So I've researched this a little bit. It seems that the lunar soil, the soil on the moon, is actually different in nature to any soil that we actually have access to. When you take lunar soil and you place a boot that looked like Neil Armstrong's boot on the lunar soil, it makes a different impression to one you would expect from Earth's soil. When you take Earth's soil, when you expose it to a certain impression, then we're obviously used to a certain impression being made on the soil. However, when it comes to lunar soil, a different impression than expected is made on the lunar soil than we would expect from Earth's soil.
Another reason for why this is simply flawed is because when the astronauts went to the moon, they wore lunar overshoes, and this has the grip so that the astronauts could stay on the surface of the moon without slipping or falling, as there is no atmospheric pressure and no gravity. Once they took off this overshoe, then it became a smooth shoe.
Out of all of the moon landing conspiracy theories, I would say this is probably the weakest, even weaker than the flapping flag theory, because this theory has been debunked not only by scientists, but also Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's suits have been tested after the event on lunar soil, and it's made the same impression.
So really the question is now, why haven't humans gone back to the moon since 1969?
So I think the answer to this is obvious, and I think it's simple. Elon Musk said it recently. People have been saying it maybe since the 1980s. The reason is public funding was interested in one thing: novelty. The US public wanted something novel. They wanted something that would really draw the eyes of attention of not only the US public, but also of the world at large. And being the first people on the moon is surely a novel affair that can draw many views and many eyes to your country, to your economy, and to your skills and innovation that the US had much of, especially in the 1960s. However, it seems that the entire reason that we haven't been back to the moon, according to most historians and people who know space history, is the lack of public funding. At the end of the day, if people don't want to send their tax dollars to sending more people to the moon, then they won't do it. the novelty effect is gone the moment you've been to the moon once. When you've been to the moon once, everyone says, okay, been there, done that. Let's focus on something else. There were almost no resources that were known to be on the moon to mine of any source. Right now, we know it's helium-3 to be found on the moon, which can be mined. The helium-3 found on the moon can actually generate billions of dollars of income and is actually regenerating a modern space race in our day. So nevertheless, even though we haven't been to the moon since the original moon landing, we will be back. There's helium-3 to be mined. And in my view, there's clear and good reason that taxpayers didn't want to go back because there was no money to be found on the moon. Now there's money to be found on the moon, we're going to go back.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's also been similarly a shift in priorities. I feel like the following Apollo programs have now focused on space exploration, space shuttle programs, station development, robotic missions, and the likes. Just a question for you all. Just another proof for why the moon landing was faked is the lack of stars in the photos. Why do you guys think this is?
So if you understand the principles of photography, I'm not saying that I do, but what I've read is, if you understand the principles of photography, when photons are emitted onto the surface of a sheet that's in the back of the camera, at least in the old cameras used back then photons emitted from closer by are obviously going to cause much, much less incident reflection. And therefore, based on that, you can expect to see things that are closer to you much more clearly in photos, which is why when things get further away in photos, the photos get much more blurry. You see a lot of different visual effects that happen to the photos, especially if you try and photograph the sun, try and have a look at what happens. So when you take a photo with high exposure at nighttime, are you going to see stars in the back of your photo? No, you won't. I recommend you go outside and try it. Take a photo in a poorly lit area with a torch, and take a photo of yourself and torch is staring you down. See how many stars you're going to get in that photo. The answer will be you get 0.
So that is definitely one of the biggest reasons why this theory has been debunked by the public. But another reason is that this mission to the moon was huge. Over 400,000 people were involved in Apollo 11 going to the moon. So that's a lot of mouths to keep shut about it being fake. Another reason was that the moon, we have samples of the rocks from the moon. Now, these samples were collected from the trio and were indeed confirmed to be from the moon, or at least not from Earth. These samples have been extensively analyzed by scientists from around the world.
So another point, when it comes to public funding leading to actual conquests of governments to get to the moon, to get to Mars, to get to other places, even expeditions, if you look in the 1800s, like during colonization, there were various times where just the funding required to send a ship to explore new lands was higher than what countries could afford and what people were willing to pay. These days, you see there's a lot of buzz about going to Mars. Therefore, the public funding for going to Mars is much, much higher than the public funding to go to the moon. I would suggest the reason for this is we've been to the moon. And the philosophy of been there, done that. Let's get on to something bigger, something better. And something bigger, something better, in our eyes, in the eyes of humanity, seems to be the Mars expedition, which is why we're going to see NASA's announced a mission to Mars by 2028. And I believe, at least in the near future, that going to the moon is a secondary priority of going to Mars because the public had this philosophy that once we've been to the moon, that what's the point of going back? Now, obviously, as I said before, there are riches to be found. There's massive helium-3 mines, helium-3 deposits to be mined on the moon. And this could drive a will from the public to get to the moon. But the amount of people who know about the wealth to be found on the moon is relatively small. And therefore, public interest is low. And therefore, government interest in getting to the moon is even lower.
So do you think that people who have lots and lots of money, such as Richard Branson, such as Elon Musk, are now going to put some funding into going back into the moon in the coming years?
So Elon Musk has announced that we're going back to the moon. Elon Musk, SpaceX has already launched vessels that are aiming to get to lunar soil. And manned missions to the moon are going to be flying by 2026, according to NASA, according to SpaceX. Now, the advent of private spacefarers, such as Richard Branson, such as Elon Musk, is something very interesting because what we're seeing in the private domain, not in the public domain, not government funded, not taxpayer funded. There are people who have this desire for discovery, a desire for space exploration. Now, back to the conspiracy theory. If you are a conspiracy theorist, you might view this cynically. You might think, okay, these are more initiatives by the government, by whoever's defrauding me in your conspiratorial view, that these people are trying to take away what chances I have of knowing the truth, of knowing what's actually on the moon, of knowing what's out there, because you have a certain view of the universe that's cynical. However, I, not a conspiracy theorist, I think that I'm going to view this optimistically. I think that the conspiracy theories, already the 3 we've mentioned, have been debunked by most people. Maybe you guys have more that you think are worthy of mention. If you have more theories worthy of mention about why the moon landing was fakes, then go ahead. But I think they've all been thoroughly debunked.
Yeah, just another reason why I think the moon landing didn't happen is because of independent verification. We know that Soviet Russia was trying to get to the moon as well as America. And if it was faked, surely the Soviet Union would have realized, oh, but there wasn't actually a rocket in the space. Same as for Germany. They were also trying to figure out what was going on in space and scientific development during that time. And they also would have been able to closely monitor the scientific development and also seeing the space shuttle in space.
The problem with that theory is not one Soviet official claimed the US didn't go to the moon.
Yeah.
It's a foolish statement by the Soviets to say the US didn't get to the moon because it would be so easy to disprove. The Soviets had various spies throughout the US in all levels of government, maybe except for the highest level of classification in the US government. They had spies everywhere, and they would have been the first to know if it was faked. They would have been the first to stop their efforts to get to the moon. We know the USSR made serious efforts to get to the moon, and the fact that they made these serious efforts shows that even with all their spies, even with all their foreign intelligence into the US machinations, they still had no desire to get to the moon. And in my view, that seems to be a massive problem. If they believe the US faked the moon landing, why did they stop their labor and stop all their efforts to get to the moon the moment they believed the US got to the moon? If the US faked it, why did they stop all of their public funding to land on the moon? That's my question, if you believe this theory.
Yeah, so I now want to get into another topic that's beyond our Earth, and that is aliens. Now, this has been a hot topic for quite some time now. Are there other life forms outside of the Earth? I just want to put it to you both, simply. Do you believe there are aliens? Obviously, we've seen people claim there's evidence or sightings of UFOs and the like. Do you guys believe there are aliens out there?
So I saw a documentary by a guy called Bob Lazar, and he was high-level classification in the US military. He claimed to have seen UFOs, and in fact, in the next 2 years, various UFO files are going to be declassified. According to most conspiracy theorists, according to most alien believers, the US government is in possession of various UFOs. UFOs fly over Earth routinely, and it's in the government's interest, for some reason unbeknownst to us, or for some motive that they claim to know, to not let us know about the various aliens that are landing on Earth. So the best theory I've heard for why aliens do exist is actually a response to the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox is basically made up of two parts. In simple terms, it states there are around 300 million possibly habitable planets in the universe, and they've been around for billions of years. Part two, we haven't observed any extraterrestrial life. Putting these two together, there are a few answers that maybe you could respond with, but putting these two together, it's almost impossible to refute that there are no aliens in the universe, because if they were, we would have seen them by now. The fact that we haven't seen any means that they don't exist. So there's one answer that I think is a very good answer to the Fermi paradox, which is the great filter. The great filter argument is to say that life exists all over the universe. Hundreds of millions of civilizations, hundreds of millions of groups and spacefaring even civilizations. However, these civilizations can never actually reach any other civilizations or make contact because of something known as the great filter. The great filter is something, whether it's war, whether it's lack of sourcing of renewable energy on planets, that stop any civilization from reaching the stars. Either a civilization is going to run into wars and conflicts between its people that will make it too difficult for it to reach the stars. That's one possible filter. Another filter could be that the amount of energy we have on any solar system is simply not enough to reach another planet. So, according to the great filter argument, according to this explanation of the Fermi paradox, there is life, and there's life everywhere. However, this life cannot be observed, because there's something that will stop any civilization from reaching the stars.
So obviously you're saying there's these habitable zones, they're also known as Goldilocks zones, in which scientists have identified the concept around stars where conditions are just right for liquid water to exist and key ingredients for life as we know it. So are you saying those zones are too far away from each other that even if there are life forms on other planets, they won't be able to meet with each other?
So I'm saying they could even possibly meet with each other technically. Within reality, there is a technical possibility of them meeting each other. However, there's an issue that every civilization is going to face at a certain point in its growth, in its development. At that point in that development, we don't know what it is because we haven't reached it yet, but we will eventually. Either there's a nuclear war that destroys the planet, either there's a lack of energy to actually get to another planet. There's some issue that's going to stop any civilization from developing to the point where it can contact another civilization. That's what the great filter basically argues. And I think there's actually another very good scale that actually shows us how the Great Filter could apply, which is something called the Kardashev scale. So a guy named Kardashev came up with a scale for classifying civilizations. It goes from type 1 through to type 5. Type 1 civilizations have harnessed all the energy of their home planet. Type 2 civilizations have harnessed all of the energy of their solar system, and type 3 have classified all of the energy of their solar system, and not only their solar system, but of their local group. So that being said, according to the Kardashev scale, humanity right now is on a 0.8. We're going to expect that any civilization cannot get past 1.5, because by 1.5, you can contact other civilizations. So there's something. We don't know exactly what it is, but there's something, maybe war, maybe a lack of energy, that's going to stop any civilization from contacting us. So there could be aliens out there. But since they can't contact us, I don't think there's any use in even mentioning it.
Now, I agree that there is a high probability of there being extraterrestrial life in the Milky Way. Now, this is because once you factor in the Drake equation, which is a probabilistic argument used to estimate the number of active communicative extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy, and once you input into this formula that there are 3,916 solar systems in the Milky Way alone out of the 200 billion galaxies in the universe, and the 300 of those are potentially habitable zones in the known universe, we can then find Goldilocks zones or potential habitable zones full with life. I think that once you look at the abundance of planets in the universe, see that there are billions or even trillions of them, then I think that it's quite important to actually understand that maybe there is life, but maybe it's just too far for us to see. I think also once we see the diversity of life on Earth, that we can understand that maybe there were aliens in the past, and maybe through evolution in another couple hundred of years, more smarter life will form.
Now, I think it's also important to mention, though, the challenge of life's origin. So skeptics such as myself would argue that the complexity and specific conditions required for life to arise make it a rare occurrence, reducing the likelihood of its existence elsewhere in the universe. Now, what I want to get into is UFOs and sightings of UFOs. So since March 2021, there have been 366 newly identified reports of sightings of UFOs, and that's just in America alone.
So, for those who don't know, UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. It often refers to vessels owned by aliens when it comes to people who believe the UFOs are extraterrestrial contacts on Earth. However, UFOs in general have been thoroughly explained as being, many aurora phenomena, many phenomena that actually occur naturally in nature, and that really UFOs aren't actually UFOs, unidentified flying objects, but rather UAPs, unexplained aerial phenomena. What's an unexplained aerial phenomena, you might ask? An unexplained aerial phenomena is really an explanation of UFO. It's not actually a UFO, but just as something that we see is happening in the stratosphere or in the atmosphere above the Earth that we can't explain right now based on our current understanding of physics, but that isn't actually contact from extraterrestrial life. That's just something that within the current understanding of physics, we can't explain the presence of. So, as I said, I saw a documentary by a guy named Bob Lazar, or Robert Lazar recently, who had high-level classification in the US Army. He was in many US bases across Los Angeles, where Area 51 is held. And in Area 51, where he claims to have been, he stated that US is in possession of several UFOs. And he's one of the most prominent pro-UFO activists and pro-UFO entities when it comes to people in the US who are claiming that the US government is in possession of UFOs.
Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI, has actively pursued the search for extraterrestrial intelligence through initiatives like the SETI program. This is where various methods to scan the cosmos for signals or signs of intelligent life are used. While no definitive evidence has been found to date, ongoing efforts continue to explore this possibility.
So you guys think that these alleged UFO sightings are really just debris coming from we don't know where?
Maybe from the stratosphere, maybe from the atmosphere, maybe just some electrons moving that produce light, because we know when electrons accelerate, they produce light. But whatever it is, like when we see in the northern lights, in the aurora, we see many unexplained aerial phenomena, which have been explained recently, but what were thought of as unexplained aerial phenomena could just be things like this. But however, many conspiracy theorists, many people who believe in UFOs, who I think are conspiracy theorists, seem to think that really extraterrestrial life is contacting us. The government is hiding this from us for some unknown reason, and the extraterrestrial life isn't clever enough to contact all of us as a species. Rather, they have to contact us one at a time in specific incidents where someone's by themselves with no scientific credibility whatsoever.
As seen on the video on the screen, published by the Pentagon in March 2021, we can see how there was a sphere flying through the Middle East. This can be scientifically explained as there was a hurricane during the time, and these high pressures in the air formed that sphere. Now, this can't be scientifically proven any more than that, but we know for certain that this isn't actually extraterrestrial life.
Hang on a second. So you're saying that a sphere was created by atmospheric pressure?
That's correct.
Interesting. So from what I understand, I've never heard of anything like that, but I'll take your word for it. So when it comes to actually credible incidences of UFO sightings where most people who see the videos actually believe that these are real UFOs, there are, in my view and in my knowledge, there are zero. However, when it comes to widespread view of UFOs, when the US public, when asked, do you believe that UFOs have flown over the US and have contacted US citizens, 15% said that they do, in fact, think that they are UFOs. So it's not a small amount of people. It's actually quite large. However, these, in my view, are fringe groups. They're people who don't actually have that much of a connection to science, to reality, when it comes to examining such phenomena as UFOs or UAPs.
So why do you guys think there's been such a big uptake in the belief of aliens in the recent years?
So I think there's always a natural desire on behalf of people, bring it back to culture, to believe in something greater, something out there that is a force that's actually beyond anything that we know of. Obviously, humanity as a group are largely religious. Over 50% of humanity are actually attached to a certain religion. And people maybe who don't have a religion to be attached to, people who want to think there's something greater, people who think it's cool to have a universe where we're not alone, want to think that there are aliens, want to think that there are UFOs that contact us. And when it comes to the widespread desire of people to feel that we're not alone in the universe, I think aliens fills a rather massive hole, and it does quite a good job if you ignore the facts.
I also feel that this kind of links to the conspiracy mindset that has been going on through millennia. There have always been stories of dragons, giant floods, how are the pyramids built, is the earth flat, is there Bigfoot? Society, especially in recent years, has been quite convinced by these conspiracy theories, but I think more so that they just want these conspiracies. They need them. They feed off them.
So society as a whole, I would say, rejects conspiracy theories. Poll numbers reflect this. However, people are out there and they want to believe conspiracy theories. In my view, as long as they don't damage you and me, as long as they keep to themselves, and as long as the conspiracy theories don't turn violent or turn into something that could actually have real damage, they're free to believe what they like.
So essentially you believe it's some sort of psychological comfort to believe in things such as aliens?
Well, I think there are three things that really lead people to hold conspiracy theories as views in general. Number one, people want a sense of belonging. People want to feel like they belong to a group of people that has something in common with them. And a group of conspiracy theorists, no matter how global, no matter how culturally diverse, can always have something that relates to them, which is a belief in the supernatural that isn't necessarily rooted in the religious, just in that there's something greater in the universe, such as extraterrestrial life or the like. Secondly, people have a need for meaning, and meaningful experience is often related to a belief in something greater than you. Now, religious people take this need for something greater and take this need for meaning, and they channel it towards deities, towards gods. And this is also another way that people apply their need for meaning. And the third thing that people want is a sense of empowerment. How powerful would you feel to be one of a small and cherished group that had the right to know about something that governments, the world, wanted none of the population to know about? To believe in conspiracy theories is really to believe that you yourself are special, that you are empowered and more empowered than everyone around you who simply follows mainstream narratives, who follows what they're told by their governments, by the media. Obviously, there are several cognitive biases at play that would definitely lead people to hold views that are known as conspiracy theories. But the bottom line is that, especially in the modern day, with media influence, with social media echo chambers, there are people who could be sucked into the vortex of conspiracy theories. They can be led down amazing and often very difficult rabbit holes of conspiracies, of views about history, about the modern world and the modern day, that can lead them often to terrible, but often to very meaningful experiences. And I think the bottom line, what we have to keep in mind is conspiracy theories, they're fringe views that aren't held by major population. But most people who hold them, they don't actually cause much risk to those around them. However, we do need to stay vigilant as a society to make sure that these views don't spiral out of control, and that the need of these people for meaning, for empowerment, and for belonging doesn't actually overcome the need of our society for social cohesion.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and we'll catch you next time.